Hi everyone, it's May. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have a book review on All Out, the No Longer Secret Stories of Queer Teens. And this is a short story anthology edited by Sandra Mitchell. So I spoke about this book in my birthday book haul, and I said I was going to do a review, so here it is. I actually have a good bit of notes to talk about. But to begin with, summary of this book, or what this book essentially is an anthology. It's a collection of short stories by different authors, and this is marketed as stories about various queer teens and throughout different times. As obvious, it says queer teens throughout the ages. As I read this book, a lot of relationships were largely female-female, which is great. And there were also inclusions of some trans males, and there were one or two stories with male and male relationships. My expectations in this book. So I expected a variety of relationships and a variety of queer representations and possibly some own voices. I will get into later on what my issues and what I loved about it, but first I wanted to touch on some of my fave short stories and why I think that some of the short stories in here are worth purchasing this, and also just like supporting it in general. But my favorite short stories, I have three of them. The first one was Roja by Anne-Marie McLemore. This story is the first one in the anthology, and it is kind of Latinx based, I believe. It could possibly also be in Spain. But anyway, the main character is a female who has been accused of being a witch by people, and she is currently trying to save her loved one who is going to be executed for crimes. And this features a relationship between a female and a trans male, and I really like that. And there's a note from the author at the end where they talk about why they came up with this story. Author Anne-Marie says that the reason she wrote this was because as a Latina I couldn't identify with a lot of the stories, and she says Leon, who is the male love interest and the male protagonist of the story, is a tribute to many assigned female at birth soldiers who fought during the war, and I just found that really nice, and I really liked her note at the end. It made the story even better, and I thought it was well written. And that was one of my favorite of all of them. My next favorite is And They Don't Kiss at the End by Neela Magruder. And this story featured an asexual female who was struggling with the fact that she loved a guy, but she didn't feel comfortable telling him that, hey, I don't want to kiss, I don't want to do any of this. And so it was her dealing with the fact that like she couldn't just avoid him, she needed to actually talk to him about it. And I really loved this story. It had a great beginning and end and a satisfactory ending. And I just love the representation of asexuality that was in it. It was very natural, and as something that like I feel is almost always missed out or underrepresented is asexuality, and I just love to see that that was included inside here. And then my last like favorite is Burnt Umber by Mackenzie Lee. This was a story with two male and males, and again it had a really great satisfactory ending. It was about an artist and how he was dealing with how he felt towards the male body and how he didn't feel anything towards the females, and he was uncomfortable because all his classmates were obviously, when they were drawing, it kind of starts when they're drawing nude figures, and so it kind of deals with that and his own like attraction to someone that turns out to not be as well as he thought. And I just thought it was really well done, very well written, and I just loved the ending of it. It was very sweet. So to begin with, I will tell you that my final rating of this book was 3 out of 5 stars. And you might say, well, that means you didn't like it. Why didn't you like it? And here are my issues with the book. I expected more own voices, which was fine. There are some own voices in here, like especially with Roja, a couple of the other stories, but it was largely not, which is okay. They included a little inserts of every single one of the authors, and I was reading those, and it, like I said, it just seemed like there wasn't own voices. Maybe I'm incorrect on that. My second issue is it's largely female-female, which I love. I love that. Like, I really do. There's not enough female-female relationships anywhere, but this is kind of marketed as all queer relationships, and I still feel like it was a little bit lacking in the representation through that. And I feel like some of the stories could be very more diverse, but again, there was a lot of different cultures and races and relationships in here, so I don't think it failed at that. I think it was doing what it was trying to do. I just was not as impressed through my expectations, I believe, if that makes any sense. And then my biggest issue has nothing to do with any of the stuff I just talked about, but the fact that almost all the stories in here, except for the 3 that I mentioned, felt like the beginning of larger stories. They were not short stories, but the introduction of a story, which to me, in a short story collection, an anthology like this, you need to have a conclusive and satisfactory ending to your short stories, and a lot of them just fell short of that. The best example of an actual short story was And They Don't Kiss at the End. The character started in one place, they had their conflict was resolved and ended. And a lot of the stories, the characters started in one place, they hit their conflict, and then they resolved half the conflict, or it wasn't fully resolved. It was left open still, as if there would be more later. And to me as a reader, I was not very satisfied with that, and it kind of made me upset. And maybe the reason that bothered me so much is because I am in a fiction writing class, and that's something I'm trying to work out in my short stories, is to have a definitive end. But that was my biggest pet peeve. But I still, even though I gave this 3 out of 5 stars, really highly suggest you buy it, just in terms of supporting literature that talks about queer characters, and also because of those 3 short stories I talked about. And I mean, the other short stories were great reads, they were really well written, and maybe you won't have the same problem I will with the way they end. And if you don't have a lot of experience with queer characters, this is a great way to find them. They're all presented wonderfully. I think the representation in here, in terms of what they represented, was good, and it was well done. They didn't have to worry about angst. There's none of that stupid, silly, like everyone is just struggling, or like you actually have real people in here, which is great. And even though it is about queer relationships, it wasn't, not all the stories just focused on that. Like, there were other conflicts besides their sexuality. And again, it was touched on very naturally. Especially, I really appreciated the trans representation in here. It was touched on very naturally, and especially like Roja, just I don't know, it's something you need to read, and especially if there are author notes, please read the author notes. There's like 3 of them, but they give insight to what was written. But yeah, I really do suggest you pick up this book. It is actually quite wonderful in terms of what it did, and I believe everyone needs to start representing and picking up books that show queer relationships, especially since that is something I write in my own life. A lot of my short stories, all of my short stories deal with female and female relationships, and I try to find representations when I can. If you like this review, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Please comment below if you're interested in picking this book up. If you have any other queer related reads that you want me to read, please let me know. I have a huge list already compiled, and I would love to add more to it. And please subscribe to this channel if you want to see more videos. You can follow me on my other social media at Princess Rach on Twitter and at Stories in May on Instagram. I'm quite active on Instagram, and I kind of just lurk on Twitter, but I'm there. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great day. I will see you guys next time. Bye!